I'm Ruthanne Murphy. I'm from St. James United Methodist Church, and I'm here to talk about a mission that we have here in Little Rock where we go out to try to feed the homeless and the working poor. And today you're listening to the Happy Hippie Jesus Show with Jeremy and Bill.
Thank you, Ruthanne. Welcome to the Happy Hippie Jesus Show. We're glad you're here.
We are. It is exciting to have you. Bill's feeling a little left out this morning, so I'm going to let him ask you his most important question.
Okay, so Jeremy is under this delusion that when we talk about Jesus, we're talking about a Jesus that's stuck in time in the first century. And, I'm talking about the eternal Jesus. So do you think that Jesus is a hippie?
By the eternal Jesus, Bill apparently means the Jesus that looks exactly like him and no one else. But carry on.
Well, when you said that you were going to ask me if I thought Jesus was a hippie, I immediately said, well, no. But being an attorney and thinking I have to look everything up, I looked at in Merriam-Webster Dictionary, and it says, usually a young person who rejects the mores of established society by dressing unconventionally and favoring communal living. Well, Jesus did that. He dressed like everybody else did of the day, but he had his sandals, he had his long hair, and he lived in a commune with his disciples. So I've changed my mind.
Score another for the hippie Jesus.
All right. Ruthanne, tell us a story about Jesus that kind of tells us a little bit how you understand him. It can be a story from the Bible or for your own life, or you can even just make one up.
Well, there are plenty. I don't have to make one up. But when we started this, the little town that I grew up in, which is in western Kansas, had just been hit by an EF5 tornado and leveled flat. There was nothing left. There were 13 people killed. And while we were there with my mother, who was 87 years old, Jim and I got to talking about, Jim is my husband, I'm sorry, got to talking about the fact that we weren't doing enough. There were so many things that need to be done, and we just weren't reaching out to people like we had the ability to do. So when we got back to Little Rock, it just so happened that a lady came to our church who has worked at Dunbar School who was trying to feed the homeless out of her kitchen. Well, you can imagine that didn't last very long because that would break you. And she was seeking churches that would get involved and help to feed the homeless. So Jim and I immediately said, well, that's something we could do. We could handle that. So we said, okay, we'll get a group of people here from St. James. Well, we did. And we have the most wonderful volunteers. They come religiously. We have people that started with us 12 years ago and that are still there almost every time. And I couldn't be happier with what they do and how they engage with the homeless and talk with them and make them feel comfortable. We started under the Broadway Bridge, and I really felt like that was the right thing to do. We were going to them on their turf and talking to them where they lived, in their homes, really. And I felt like that was the way that Jesus would want us to do it. However, the city council didn't think that was such a good idea. And we eventually, when the Broadway Bridge got rebuilt, we got kicked out. And I'm sorry to say that we tried several places and we were told we were not welcome. Fortunately, there's a man here in Little Rock. He and his family have come down to Under the Bridge for 20 years. He brought his pulpit, he brought chairs, and he's done church for the homeless every Sunday for the last 20 years. And he managed to get a building on West Markham, and he told us we were more than welcome to come there to feed. So we weren't getting run off anymore, which was a good thing. We fed there for quite a while, and then he moved his building to Asher and Roosevelt. I still wasn't satisfied that we were getting the downtown people, the people who really needed to be fed, who live in the woods along the most of our streets, really. And so we are now feeding at Canvas Community Church on West 7th Street. We're feeding at Asher and Roosevelt, and we're feeding at St. Andrew's Methodist Church on Baseline Road. And we were very lucky because there were two St. James people who were at St. Andrew's, Jenny and Glenn Duncan, who welcomed us with open arms. it has become so popular at that church that not only on the nights that we feed, they feed the other 2 Monday nights, because there are so many working poor in that area who don't have enough food for their children. And so it's a choice of whether you're going to feed them or whether you're going to put a roof over their head. And so this sort of takes some of the pressure off of them, and I love that. I've always wanted to get someplace going in Southwest Little Rock.
So do y'all rotate from one church or one location to another each Monday, or what do you...
No, we've got enough volunteers that I just assign them a different place. At St. Andrews, they've gotten so into this that we just take the food to them, and they pass it out and feed the people. We send them sandwiches and fruit and that kind of thing, and they can make lunches for the kids to take to school the next day. At Canvas and at Brother Joe's, which is the church at Arch and Roosevelt, I divide the people up, and some go there, some go there. Some people want to just go to one place, which is fine. If that's where they like to be, that's where they should be. But we enjoy seeing a different group. When I go to Canvas, I see people that I've known forever. When I go down to Joe's, I see people I've known forever. So many of the same people who came to see us under the bridge, and that thrills me to death because I thought we had lost contact with them.
Bill, you grew up in Southwest Little Rock, so I'm going to let you for just a couple of minutes. Why don't you explain, to all of our international guests and listeners from around the world, because, we're world famous, a little bit about the layout of Little Rock and why it's necessary to have these different churches.
Okay, Southwest Little Rock used to be a nicer part of Little Rock at one time, and then white flight happened, truthfully, and everyone moved to West Little Rock. They moved out west, and they continue to move out west. It's like the old saying, go west, young man, go west, rich man, is what it is now. And so Southwest Little Rock has been a place of poverty. It's been a place of violence as well. Many of you may remember about 25 years ago, there was an HBO documentary called Banging in Little Rock about gang violence in Little Rock, and much of that documentary took place in Southwest Little Rock. Because of that kind of reputation, the wonderful and good people in Southwest Little Rock get forgotten or believed that they just don't exist. And truthfully, Southwest Little Rock is full of some of the most gracious, generous, and loving people you can meet. Ruthanne, I remember when I was at St. James that when you started Under the Bridge Ministry, you would do fresh cooked meals. Are y'all still doing that?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
It starts about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, depending on what we're making. And we we divide up into groups. My husband, Jim, does most of the cooking or gives the orders. And then all the rest of us jump. There's a group that come in specific to make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. We make sack lunches for all of the homeless to have the next day, so that there's another meal involved. Not only the hot meal on that night, but then the lunch the next day, which I try to pack with protein.
Yeah. If I remember correctly, the fish fry was probably the most popular that y'all did.
I think that people all over downtown Little Rock smelled that, and it was wonderful. We took fryers down. It was on the 4th of July. We took fish fryers down, and we were cooking out under the bridge. Well, there's such a breeze off the river that it kept blowing out our fires. So there is a little hut down there that I think used to be where the people that had the bridge lift and all that stuff stayed. We went in there, lit up our fires, they stayed. We cooked fresh catfish, french fries, hush puppies, and they loved it.
Which is a beautiful and uniquely Southern thing to do for all of us.
But it's just like Jesus, because what did Jesus do when he showed up at the beach after he was resurrected? What did he make? He made fish, and I think if he had been Southern instead of Jewish, it would have been fried catfish instead of grilled fish.
Absolutely.
How has working under the bridge shaped your faith?
I think that I've learned that really these are the same people as everybody else. They are down on their luck sometimes. Now, there are 2 sets of people that we encounter. Some want to be there, either because of addiction or their mental health. they have no desire to get off of where they're living and how to improve themselves. But there's another set who have just had such bad luck, and I could think of one in particular, a man who had a brain tumor. When he had surgery, he had to stay at UMS for a very long time, and he lost his family. He lost his home. He lost any income. And so when he got out, he didn't have anywhere to go. So he slept on a bench outside the Verizon Arena, and because he thought it was safer there than to be off in the bushes somewhere sleeping where so many of them do. And he would get up at 4 o'clock every morning, and he would walk down to Roosevelt, where he worked in a chicken packing plant. And he was doing that because he wanted to get back on his feet. He didn't like where he was living. And fortunately, we have another charity, which is called Rock of Hope. And we had a house that was not that far from where he was working. And although it really wasn't ready to be inhabited, we put him in that house so he wasn't out, sleeping on the bench, that he didn't have to walk that far every day to get to his job. And he was able to get back on his feet.
So when did you start Rock of Hope?
I'm so glad you asked.
And also, what is Rock of Hope?
Okay. Yeah. Working at the shelters when it's so cold, several of us were talking, and I want to give full credit to John Ripa, who is just a magnificent person who is so kind. He came up with the idea that in talking to these people, that the thing that they were lacking most was housing. And so we talked, and we decided that we should form this group called Rock of Hope. And Rock of Hope was able to buy 2 houses, I think we started with. The first house was on Battery, which is still my favorite house because I have so much sweat equity in that house. I feel like that I should love that house forever. But we got it habitable, and it was very important that these houses not be just a place to crash. They need to be nice houses where they could feel comfortable. You can't apply for a job. You can't dress to go for an interview. You can't do any of the things that you need to do to get back on your feet if you're one of that group who wants to do that, if you don't have a place to shower and if you don't have an address. Everybody wants to know what your address is, or they're not going to give you a job. So that was kind of what the impetus was for Rock of Hope. And I think it was maybe 2009. This is where I need Jim, because he can remember dates and I can't. But anyway, so we started meeting down at Canvas. And that was when Jamie Bentley was the preacher down there. And Jamie was enthusiastic about it. We had several people who would come and talk to us and give us ideas on how we might get this going. And we sort of pooled money, got our first house, which is this house I was talking about on Battery that I spent every weekend sanding, scraping, anything you can think of that you have to do to get a house ready to be painted and to be habitable. I was there every weekend. So I feel like that was our baby. But then we were able to buy another house shortly thereafter, which didn't need as much work. We even had to have the house on Battery leveled. It was leaning to one side. So we really tried very hard to make these nice houses where people could be comfortable. And over the years, we have migrated from taking people off the street. Unfortunately, we got a lot of people who were in the second group who didn't want to do anything with their lives. They just thought, well, we'll just say what we need to say to get in that house, and then we're not going to look for a job. So we had several incidents of that, and several things happened. And we've kind of gravitated now to taking people from a group called Exodus, which goes out to the prisons and does prep on these people. Prior to them being discharged from prison, they get how to write a resume, how to dress for an interview, what kinds of things you need to do to grow your life, to have a savings account, to save up for the things that you want. You can't just go out and get everything at once because you can't pay for it. They try to teach them budgeting. There's a lot of things that Exodus teaches. And so when they come out, I don't know if people know this or not, but when you leave prison, they don't even give you clothes. You're just sent out, and so you have nothing. You have no kind of toothbrush, no towel, no anything. So we've kind of started taking these people from halfway houses. Now, we're not approved by the Arkansas Department of Corrections because they have so many things to jump through, we just haven't done it. But we can take them from halfway houses, and right now, all of our houses are full. We have 6 houses, and they're all full of people who have come from the Exodus Project. And I have such hope for these people that they're going to be able to go on. We charge them what we call a program fee, and we don't charge them very much. It barely covers the utilities. Our houses are all paid for, so we're lucky. We don't have to put out any money for that, so their little program fee that they pay covers the utilities, and then they can live there 6 months to a year. And the whole idea is they're to be saving money. The Exodus program is pretty good about getting them a job. So really, we've not had to hunt jobs for them, and that's great. There have been several companies here in town that have helped them to expand and go forward with this project, and it's great.
I imagine that a lot of people, the first thing they would think in entering into a program or charity like that is, well, how can you trust these people to do the right thing when you get? Have you had any problems or any issues?
Yeah, we have. And the funniest one I can think of is one of our guys went off, didn't pay his program fees, and left a bunch of stuff there like we were supposed to keep it for him. And so that house that he was in had a garage, and we put it in the garage. Well, Jim, who takes care of most of our houses, changed the lock on the garage door. And a couple of weeks later, one of the guys living in the house called and said, "Did you know there's a great big hole in the garage roof?" And we said, "No." This guy had come back, and because the door was locked, he just cut a big hole in the garage roof, got his stuff out, and went on. And so, yeah, we've had some very strange things happen that I don't really know how to explain, and they probably are not people who are thinking like you and I.
Right.
I would think, I would never think of damaging someone else's property, but that's not always the mindset.
Was that an Exodus house or the story from Luke?
I think that was an Old Testament story.
Just say a word about, I guess, your faith, or what inspires you to spend every weekend at a house, like scraping floors and sanding that you're never going to live in and no one you know is ever going to live in. That's a level of dedication. So what inspires you to do that?
Well, one of my favorite scriptures in Matthew, and I'm sure everybody knows this one, Matthew 25. I like where it starts, "And he shall set the sheep on his right hand and put the goats on the left. Then shall the king say unto them on his right hand, Come, ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. Naked, and ye clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came unto me. Then shall the righteous answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry, and feed thee, or thirsty, and give thee drink? When did we see thee a stranger, and take thee in, or naked, and clothe thee? Or when did we see thee sick, or in prison, and come unto thee? And the king shall answer and say unto them, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done unto one of the least of these my brethren, you have done it unto me. And I believe that with all my heart.
Something I noticed in that passage as you're reading it, it says, you gave me meat. And in first century Israel, meat was a luxury item. It was above and beyond feeding someone. It was going beyond. And that reminds me a little bit of your decision when you started Under the Bridge Ministries, that you were going to cook hot meals right on site because everyone there deserved a hot, fresh meal.
Everyone does deserve a fresh, hot meal. You know, I know there are other people who go down and they're able to take hot dogs or hamburgers or But St. James is a big church, and there are a lot of people there, and I expect them to help us get all this done. They're very good about making sure that Under the Bridge has a bank account. I used to try to get everybody to donate, but now we've kind of gotten lazy, and Jim and I generally spend every Sunday afternoon at Sam's getting the materials for whatever it is we're going to prepare. But that's okay. As long as I've got the means to make this meal, make it work, and make it something tasty. And that's all that's important to me.
Y'all had to change locations quite a bit. Can you talk a little bit about the pushback you got from the city without getting too angry?
Well, let's just say that my law partner and I had a pretty good case that we thought we could bring against them. However, we didn't have to do that because of Brother Joe taking us in on West Markham. There's been several cities that have tried to kick the homeless out. I feel like that here in Little Rock, our city council wants to pretend like we don't have any homeless. Well, that's ridiculous. I don't know any city of any size that doesn't have homeless. And so pretending that we don't and shoving them somewhere is ridiculous. Unfortunately, a council was appointed to decide where we could feed. Now, not one of us, the people who go down and do this, was asked to be on that council. The people who were on that council were people who are business owners downtown. Well, you can imagine what their response was. They thought we needed to go out to Jericho Way and feed. Well, I went out to Jericho Way and I looked around, and it's a wonderful daycare facility for the homeless that the city of Little Rock has set up. I don't minimize that in any way. But there's a train track right beside it. And we take children with us all the time to feed. I love it that parents think their children need to see this and be involved in it. And I'm not taking children right by a train track, and you can't make me. And I sort of indicated to them that I wasn't going to do it.
And I guess since not everyone listening is from Little Rock, Jericho Way is also a fair distance away from where most of the homeless population is centered.
Absolutely.
It's further than you would want to walk.
And the city's counter to that was that they have 2 vans that each hold 12 apiece, and they would bring them down there. Well, Jericho Way closes at 2:30 in the afternoon. We don't feed till 6 o'clock at night. So what were they going to do between then? And I can see them bringing all these people down, making several trips, and then just deciding that they weren't going to take them back downtown. It just wasn't a good idea. And I think that the fact that they had a couple of homeless people on there, one living at our house, which is a shelter, and then I'm not sure where the other guy was from, but they had been on the street. So that was their answer to the people who would know about it. Well, I'm sorry, but it isn't hard to forget bad times. So I don't think those people remembered what it was like to not have a meal and not have a place to go to get a meal.
As we're reading this, it's in my mind that we just read the Acts text, Acts 5, where Peter and John are in all this trouble with the judicial council, was the lectionary text this last week. And it occurs to me that it seems that God's kingdom always comes in conflict with earthly kingdoms in some way, and that laws that we set up as a society don't necessarily reflect heavenly kingdoms. So I'm going to be quiet and just let you say whatever you want to say about that.
Well, as an attorney, it came to me immediately that that was unconstitutional for them to tell us that we couldn't continue to feed where we were feeding. I mean, yes, it's public property, so I'm pretty sure that I'm part of the public, and so are all my volunteers. And if we want to go down there and set up our little tables and feed, I think we should be able to do that. But that problem sort of solved itself with Joe, and then because I had so wanted to get in Southwest Little Rock, getting Jenny and Glenn involved down there at St. Andrews, and then the church on West 7th Canvas had met on Monday nights for a while. Now they meet on Sunday nights, and so it's okay for us to go in there and feed. Now they have a very active minister there, Gail Baldwin Brooks, who wants the homeless to come in, and she has started a program on Monday nights where she lets them talk about things that are important in their life and maybe things that we could be done to help them get past where they are. Sometimes she lets them watch TED Talks, and sometimes she just has videos. And one night she just had the music video of, and I can't remember his name, the guy that sang Happy.
Okay, yes. What's that, Farrell?
Yeah, Farrell. Yeah. And she said she hadn't heard that song, and I just looked at her like, Gail, where have you been? But she said, maybe I don't have that in Russellville. I don't know. It may have brought a smile to a lot of their faces. So she's really trying to minister to these people who really have nothing, and it's wonderful.
What's cool about that is that we often forget in our rush to help to ask, what do you need? And so that's what she's doing, letting them talk and say, this is what we need. This is who we are. These are the experiences we have, because I dare say most of us have no clue what it's like to live on the streets.
There was a gentleman that lived here several years ago named Dennis Beavers, who was wonderful with the homeless. He gave his retirement check every month to buy supplies for them. He did all kinds of things. But the most interesting thing was that he set up a panel. And I think there were 8 people that were homeless for different reasons. And so we could ask questions and they could tell us what they wanted to tell us. And one of the things that I brought away from that meeting was that every single one of them just wanted to be treated like a human being, wanted us to make eye contact with them, wanted us to think they had value. And that's such a simple thing. One would think that would be the first thing that would come to our minds, but it doesn't.
I'll interject here. Carl Paul, who is a part of the Canvas community, was one of our podcast guests, and Bill will link that episode in the show notes if you want to hear more about Canvas.
You're giving me more work to do.
Someone needs to.
Yeah.
And Paul Atkins is a member of Rock of Hope, so you can always talk to him about that.
Yes.
I mean, Bill, we both know you only work for like 2 hours on Sunday morning, so a couple of show notes, not a big deal.
I don't preach that long, dude.
All right, Bill, you anti-establishment, think Jesus is a hippie, down with, civility. Anything you want to say about God's kingdom and earthly kingdoms colliding?
One, it's countercultural for sure. It's very apolitical. Not apolitical, but very... No, it is very political, actually,
right.
Because we're talking about pledging our allegiance not to this nation or any nation on earth, but to God's kingdom, and that requires a lot of change in who we are. Right now I'm doing a series on the Lord's Prayer, and we're taking it verse by verse, and I'm reminded, as you are talking, of the line, give us this day our daily bread. And we think of this as make sure we get our bread. And if you go back and see where Jesus is moving, is Jesus is referencing directly to the manna in the wilderness, and everybody was told, just get what you need. Don't get any more than you need for today. And that's what is so countercultural about the kingdom, is that if we all just take enough and no more than enough, then there's plenty to go around. But that's not the culture. We're built on a consumer culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess I'll put my non-hippie point on this. The statement that Luke writes in the original Greek, Jesus is Lord, is the exact same statement that people would make about Caesar. They would say Caesar is Lord, or Caesar is Lord, or Caesar's are rude. So when Luke writes that, that Jesus is Lord, or the disciples say that, they're making a political statement, and they're choosing Jesus over Caesar at what would have come with great cost to them originally. So the gospel is very political, not in a Democrat-Republican way, but a God's kingdom versus the way we think human kingdoms work. And we've read some of that out of the scripture over the years because it's easier just to pretend like God wants what we want. And it seems that we're constantly reminded that that's not the case, that God's kingdom works differently, and what God wants for humanity is not for a few of us to have everything.
As you go forward with Rock of Hope and with Under the Bridge Ministries, what are your dreams going forward? I know you well enough to know that you're not satisfied yet.
Well, I really thought we could get another place in North Little Rock. However, I found out that Church of Christ feeds on Monday night in North Little Rock to all the hungry children. And of course, being big on children, I love that. I think that's a great thing, so I'm not going to get in their way and try to make it something else. But certainly there are other areas that we could target. And I don't know how much more I can push my volunteers, but they've gone with me with everything I've thought up, so I can't ask them to do much more, I don't think.
Right. How many houses have y'all purchased so far for Rock of Hope?
Well, at one point we were up to 7. But one of it, we had to buy 2 in a package, and the second one on that was in such bad shape. The roof was falling in. Somebody had taken all the plumbing. People had broken in there and slept there, and it really was in very bad shape. And just so happened that somebody in that neighborhood's sister was going to move back, and they wanted to buy that house from us. So we sold it to them, which gave us more money to fix up more houses. So there's always a reason for what you do. But I think we're at 5 right now, and we actually opened a new one this weekend, one that was donated to us by a family that used to live here. He was a minister, and they live in California now, and they're never coming back here. And so they thought that Rock of Hope would be a good place to donate that house, and it's up and ready to go.
That's not a statement against Arkansas that they're never coming back, is it?
No. I think that they're retiring in California where they live.
Yeah, I guess before we kind of transition into the last kind of part of our interview, you tell this beautiful story about how your faith has evolved that might not be obvious to everyone listening. So I want to say it back to you, and you can tell me the parts that I got wrong. You started at your home, and this tornado came through, and you had this realization, we can do more, but you didn't have any idea what that meant.
Right.
So you took a step when you came back, and God opened this door and showed you, well, here's like some way that you can get involved. You got involved feeding people, and you said, oh, we can do a little bit more. People need homes, and that might be one of those keystone things that'll help people transition off the streets. So you took that next step, and then you get into that, and it didn't go exactly how you wanted it, but there was still a need for housing, and God opened this next door through Exodus. And then you're kind of taking that step, and you're seeing other steps you can take now, that there's this faithfulness is not knowing the end of the story when we begin, but being willing to say, there's a problem, and I'm going to be attentive to the next step that God shows me, and the next step, and the next step. So I think that's a beautiful model of your own life that I heard in the interview about what discipleship looks like. So I just wanted to commend you for that. And if there's anything you want to add about your story, feel free.
Well, there is one thing. I have my own prodigal son story. There was a young man who approached us and said that he had managed to hike here from Florida, but he was trying to get to Illinois where his family was. He had been estranged from them, and he felt like if he could get back up there and they could see him and they could see that he was really sorry for the things that he had done and that he wanted to change his life, that they would accept him. So, you have to watch this fine line about whether you're really going to give people money or not. We are not trying to enable people, but we are trying to help people, and that's 2 different things. So we got him a bus ticket, and we met him at the bus depot. We didn't just give him the ticket. We met him at the bus depot. I made up a bunch of sack lunches, and we packed those up for him, and he was going to have food to eat all the way to Illinois. And we put him on the bus. We made sure the bus left. And then I thought, well, that's the end of it. We'll never hear anything else. But a couple of months later, we got a note from him that he was at home, that he had a job. His family had welcomed him home. They were glad to bring him back into the family. And I thought, boy, I know where that story came from. So it really thrilled my heart to have my own. Your
own little prodigal son story. That's great. We learn faith lessons from the strangest places sometimes. Do you remember the movie The Jerk with Steve Martin?
Vaguely.
I learned a faith lesson from that story that your story reminded me of. In The Jerk, Steve Martin's asking his first employer as he's out in the world, what can I do for you after I make it. And his employer just says, when you get rich and famous, send me a postcard. So whenever we help someone like that at our church and they ask me, well, what can I do? I said, well, when you get to where you're going, send me a postcard. Yeah.
Well, I had said to him that day when we put him on the bus, let me know how this goes. But I really didn't think he would. And I was thrilled when I got that message from him.
Yeah. So we learned Bill is the jerk. And I don't know what else. There's a question we ask everyone towards the end of our time together.
Okay.
What's saving your soul right now? Or another way, maybe what's feeding your soul right now?
Well, interestingly enough, I have been going to Canvas and helping people on the street who really probably would qualify for Social Security insurance, certainly not Social Security disability because they don't have enough work hours to qualify. But I've been able to get several people off the street. One lady who is in an electric wheelchair who was living out in the woods, guys. How she got in and out of the woods in her electric wheelchair, I don't know. But she had to go to the library every day and plug it in, her wheelchair in to get charged. So that was, it was thrilling to me to be able to get her off the street. And somehow it was right at her birthday when her check came in, for her first check. And she insisted that she was taking Jim and I to dinner. Well, I felt really bad about that. I said, well, that's not right. I don't want her to spend her money on us. And Jim said, that's what she wants to do, and that's what we're going to do. And I said, okay. So we all went out to dinner, and it was just lovely. We had such fun with her and her husband. And I'm so happy they're off the street. And she, ever so often, she'll text me and tell me how they're doing. And so there's something always. And I just recently called Jericho Way and said, would you be willing to let me come out there one morning and help people fill out paperwork? You know, so many of these people don't really read and write very well. And I am so lucky. I've had so much education that I feel like I've got to share some of my skills with some people who don't have those skills. And so I intend to do Social Security, talk to people who don't know how to get on Medicaid. As you know, several people in Arkansas have recently been kicked off Medicaid. And what they don't know is they have to reapply to get back on Medicaid. So I'm going around shouting that out the windows at everybody so they know to get Medicaid again, because that's the only way so many of them get health care. And they don't even know, like, to apply for low-income housing, they don't know how to fill that out. And it doesn't take me very long, and it doesn't take much skill. All it takes me is to go out there and be willing to do it. So Wednesday of this week, I'm going out and meet everybody and see what I can do out there.
How wonderful.
Bill, what's saving your soul today?
Well, I'll tell you what's not saving my soul today. The pollen. The pollen that is out is not saving my soul. So I may have to say at the moment, what's feeding my soul is allergy medicine. But no, what's saving my soul or feeding my soul right now is study at the moment. There's certain times in my life when getting into a sermon series, prepping for that, just feeds me more than other times. And we're doing one right now that's feeding me. So what's saving your soul, brother?
Well, we're doing a series of podcast recordings today.
Yeah.
So if our audience is concerned about Jeremy's soul, they're going to have to listen next week, and I'll answer that question on one of our later episodes today.
Ruthanne, if people want to help out with Under the Bridge or Rock of Hope, maybe offer a donation or volunteer, don't give your phone number or anything, but where are some places they can contact you or others to do that?
If they're interested in Under the Bridge, they can always call St. James. There's somebody there to answer the phone most of the time. If they don't know the information, they'll know who has it. And I get calls from them ever so often, so I try to hook people up with the right group. And we used to take clothes. We've quit doing that, but every fall I get coats and blankets, because if you're homeless, you have to carry everything with you on your back that you have. So when it gets nice, They just leave the coat in the blanket somewhere, and when it starts getting cold again, they don't have one. So that is a way that people can help. Now, for Rock of Hope, I have a story, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
We did have a break-in at this new house that I told you we just opened this weekend, and we had bought $1,500 worth of new windows because the windows were terrible. And we had our paint and our tile, and we put some of the furniture we were going to use in that house in there because we don't really have a lot of good storage. Somebody broke in, kicked in the back door, took all of that. That was about $3,000 worth of stuff. And, we don't run on a profit. We don't have a profit. We barely just scrape by every month, which is what we should be doing. There's nobody that gets paid in our organization. So that was sort of an overwhelming thing for us, but we've managed to squeeze by, and the house is open, and this is the first time ever that we've put some new furniture in it. People have been so good to donate furniture. If you have kitchen items, those walk off, so give me your kitchen items, because we have to redo kitchens all the time. Plates, bedding, I'll take bedding. Most of our beds are twin beds, and everybody has their own room with a key so that they can keep their things in that room. So I'm always needing bedding. Just really anything that you have to set up housekeeping, we can always use for Rock of Hope. And for Rock of Hope, I'm going to give you a phone number, 501-590-7040. And that's my husband's telephone number. So don't call him up and say mean things, because he won't like me telling that. But he really runs our houses. He's retired, and he keeps our houses going. And he would be more than glad to take your donation for Rock of Hope.
And you take money too, right?
Oh, we'd take money. Yes, we would. We would like to get our bank account up a little bit above $6 again, That's about what it took to get that house up and running.
Right. And can they send checks for Rock of Hope or Under the Bridge to St. James with it in the memo line?
Yes, and if you put on there, St. James has been very good to Rock of Hope. They have helped us many times, and we actually did a couple of fundraisers there where we had praise bands from different churches come and perform, and they were very well received. Since then, we've been doing what we call Race for Shelter, which is just a 5K race. This year, everybody was so worn out we didn't do anything, and wouldn't you know, this would be the year that we would have the big hit on all the stuff being stolen out of the house. But that's the way things work, and I always trust God to get it fixed.
And I think that's the best place to end this. Thank you so much, Ruthanne. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.